This video is brought to you by Sporlan, quality, integrity, and tradition. This morning we have a Lennox package unit. The customer said that over the weekend it wasn't cooling properly. It was working, but just not as good as it should be working. So just walked up. Unit's running, not all the fan motors are running. Let's open up this panel. This place is infested with spiders. We don't have any active errors. If we go into the programming, we can go and hit recall. Spider webs galore. Son of a gun. That's not gonna work. You get a different my goodness gracious, this is more difficult than it needs to be. The dip switch is like going bad or something. Alright, let's see what error codes come up. 82, that's a power cycle. 34, that's I think that's a low pressure first or second stage. 32, 24, 34. Okay, so if we come right here, 24 low pressure 2, 34 freeze stat 2, 35 freeze stat. So it looks like they got freeze stats. Contactors are trashed. All the compressors seem to be running. Let's scroll on over here. Have a look at filters. Filters look fine. They were just changed 7/31/24. Oh, okay. Yeah, it was a while ago. Let's open this guy up where the indoor blower motor section's at. I mean, we're running. This unit has a newer blower assembly. We rebuilt this a while back. So that's running good. Condensation. Okay, we're gonna have to gauge up on this guy because, yeah. But you know what? All the condenser fan motors should be running right now. These ones aren't. This one looks like it might be locked up. Let's get some tools and see what's going on here. Come over here. Let's have a look at this guy. Oh, it's not locked up. Condenser fan motors aren't locked up. We're not calling for both stages yet, so let's have a look. Oh, it looks like the whole unit just shut down, like it's satisfied. Oh, okay. All right, well, let's turn. First off, we're gonna reset the error codes. Just hold down that button so the screen goes blank. Now it has no more memory of error codes. That way nobody gets confused. There you go. And then the 0 should go away. And we know that we don't know that the thermostat's working. I need to go down to the thermostat and make sure that, because I ramped that thing down really cold and I don't think it's 60 degrees in the dining room. So let me go have a look at that. This is what I'm talking about. Everywhere you walk here, there's just spider webs everywhere. It'll freak you out if you're not expecting it. This restaurant has always had a spider problem since when they opened in like 2003. I remember being young and being like, yeah, there's every time you'd walk on the roof, you'd be covered in spider webs. It's crazy. One thing I could tell you is the returns are plugged on this AC. I'm just down here checking the thermostat. Everything else is working fine. It's reading accurately, but this is one return and there's another one, and they're both plugged up, so they're not getting in very much return air. I love it when they make it easy for me to drop a return to clean it. But yeah, that thing's pretty caked. And then there's another one over there. It's actually not as bad as I thought it was, but we'll get up on the ladder and have a look at it too. Tiny little space though. Yeah, it's not as bad as I thought it was, but from looking down, it looks pretty bad. But when you get up here, it's just more or less surface stuff, but still that can affect it. And then the other side being dirty can affect it too. At this point, I'm gonna gauge up on this guy. So we're gonna put it into test mode right now. So I've got it, oh shoot, the test mode might not work. It had test on it a second ago. Let's see, gosh darn it. It said C 10. This thing's probably messed up. That sucks. Go ahead and push that back. See if this goes away, and then push this in. I hate it when these boards go bad. They start getting really old and they don't work in test mode anymore. It's like the little switch is bad. Gosh darn it. Oh, there we go. C10, C11, hold down. There we go. All 3 compressors are running. Let's give it a minute. We'll let the system stabilize out. I'm gonna get all my probes out. I got my probe bag up here. And then all the condenser fan motors should turn on here in a few minutes too. So it's not too crazy, but we have elevated head pressure as we get to the 2nd and 3rd stage. Now I kind of mentioned that according to Measure Quick, we're kind of high on temperatures for the 3rd stage. Well, it's partially because this is pulling outside air right here a little bit, and it's warmer. This is the 3rd stage evaporator up here. We're getting kind of mixed readings right here. So if I put this right there, it'd probably get a little bit more of an accurate reading and not just from the return. That's something that always happens on these ACs. Let's scroll over here though and see what's going on with these condenser fan motors. Oh, they're all running. Condenser's running, condenser's running. So all the fan motors are running, and we have a slightly elevated head pressure. Makes me wonder if we have a dirty condenser. I'm just kind of feeling for the airflow in here. I mean, I feel pretty good airflow. I don't think it's a dirty condenser, really. I think that there might be something else going on here, but this unit's working. So I'm intrigued. All right, so this unit is working, but I don't know what the problem was. It's not working like amazingly. It has a lot of little issues, okay? As far as refrigerant pressures, I mean, there's nothing saying, hey, this is a problem. The delta T across the evaporator is a little bit on the low side at like 14, 15 degrees, but it's working. We do have elevated subcooling on the 3rd stage, which could, and the approach is really high, which could be a problem. As far as everything else, we're doing fine. Now, when it comes to the subcooling numbers, I'm using discharge pressure. Discharge pressure usually will be different from liquid pressure. It's just the manufacturer typically publishes discharge and suction, so that's why it's a force of habit to jump on that for me. So you tend to see a little bit higher. You're not going to see 10 degrees exactly or whatever, and it's not necessarily supposed to have 10 degrees on this unit. The manufacturer doesn't publish those numbers. They publish approach temperatures. But we're just kind of looking at everything. We're letting the unit run. I'm looking at the contactors. There's definitely some burning going on in there. Whether or not those are the problem, I don't think they are, but they definitely need to be replaced. The next thing is these capacitors. I want to test these. So we're going to test these under load. So an under load capacitor test is going to involve checking voltage across the capacitor while it's running, going right here, getting the current of the start winding. Let's call it 248 and 0.56. We're going to use the HVAC school app here, okay? So if I can get this to where you guys can see it, that'd be great. So right here, we're going to go 248, 0.56, and the capacitor is rated for 10 microfarads. Let's calculate. It's saying we're under load. It's saying that we're actually outputting 5 microfarads, 5.99, so 6. So it's saying that the capacitor is out of spec. Now, I showed you for that one, it actually is the same for all 4 of them. They're all 4 doing the same thing. So I'm definitely gonna grab some capacitors right now. We're gonna change those. I just turned the system back on, got all 4 capacitors changed out. There's the old ones right there. Those almost look to be original, but maybe not. I took current draws of every condenser fan motor before we changed them in order. So this one drops a little bit. It's reading 1.75. Let's keep going down the line. 1.78. It was reading 1.9. Let's go with this one. 1.84. This one actually went up. Interesting. 1.84. And then this one makes me wonder if the motor's going bad. And then this one dropped 1.74 from 1.92. I need to get in here and see what these motors are rated for. I think they're rated for 2.4 amps. Well, I guess I can look over here. These are OEM motors, so should be able to look on this. Condenser fans are allowed to run 2.4 amps. So we're all under on the current. So that's not a problem. All right, I want to check the air balance because that's another thing too. It's kind of hot, kind of sticky outside. And if the air balance is really negative, they could be pulling hot air in through the front door every time they open the front doors. And that would cause an issue in the building too. Because so far, nothing is jumping out at me about this AC that says it wasn't working. Now they put the call in on Sunday. It's now Tuesday. Okay, we had a holiday yesterday. So they didn't want me to come out on overtime. They put it in on Sunday, but they said Monday it was working. It just didn't feel like it was working amazing. And the only thing I saw was those low pressure and those freeze stat codes, but what confused me was there was a power cycle code, and usually the codes are in order. So the first code was a power cycle, meaning that they lost power to the unit, and then all the codes after that, following codes, are all freeze stat, low pressure, that kind of stuff. So I don't know if the manager came up here and power cycled the unit, or if those are all old codes, the freeze stat ones, because I'm not seeing anything that would cause a freeze stat issue. It could have been that they had issues before they did their last repair with belt changes and stuff. I don't know. That's why it's so important when you work on these units to clear the codes. Whenever I work on them, I clear the codes, so that way when I come back next time, I know, yeah, I cleared them last time. These are all new, you know. But we definitely had bad capacitors. I definitely don't like the contactors, but again, still, it's not what I think is the issue right now. So I'm gonna go down and check the air balance. Now, in order to check the air balance, we need all the ACs running. We need all the outside air dampers in their normal position. That's why I haven't adjusted this one. We need makeup air unit running right over there. We need exhaust fans all running and all the doors to the building shut. And then what we do is go to a door that we can easily open and just feel. Now, we're not doing a scientific air balance here. I'm just going to make sure that I don't have a lot of outside air rushing in the doors when I open them. Now, you guys can't feel this, but I just opened this side door. All the other doors are shut, and we have a pretty significant amount of outside air rushing in through this door. So that means that the building is negative, meaning that every time someone opens the door, we get a blast of outside air. And if they have a busy day and they got guests coming in and out, that would make the dining room hot. That would definitely be a problem. So let's go adjust the air balance and see why it's possibly negative in the building. Dirty returns can definitely be part of it. This is for their bar. This one isn't bad. We know that the dining room has a little bit of a dirty, but the kitchen is plugged. And if it can't pull that air up, then it can't pull air from the outside in properly too. But it can also be the metal mesh filters on the outsides of the units. And we got to make sure all the belts are nice and tight also. I did a quick clean on all their return air grills downstairs, just quickly, not like detail. They got to do detail. Let's look at the metal mesh filters. The kitchen AC, the filters are good. Dining AC, they're plugged. These metal mesh filters are plugged and they're also bad. They're all rotted out. So that's a problem. Let's look at this other AC they have right here. These ones are pretty clean. Whether or not the dampers are open is another question. Let's open this up. Dampers are shut 100%. They should be open partially. We should be pulling a little bit of outside air from every AC. So I need to look into that. Makeup air unit is running. The filters are clean. They're actually all bad, rotted out. Belt is tight. I checked it. So we should be good. We need to get this outside air damper opened a little bit and then clean the metal mesh on the other ones. Now, this location actually has a makeup air unit. Some locations don't. So we're just gonna pull minimal outside air through these. So in order to do that, you go into test and balance. There's freaking spider eggs all in here. And you have to go through the settings. So is the damper closed? Yes. Now it's gonna open it. We have to confirm that it's open. That way it can get calibrated basically. So we just gotta wait. This is not the unit we're working on. This is another unit. Now we gotta wait for it to open. And it's slowly starting to turn. So we gotta wait for it to open all the way, then we'll say yes, and then we'll be able to set our outside air settings. There's no point in cleaning these filters as they're trashed. You can see holes in them, in the stuff in here. So we'll bring some new metal mesh filters. You can see they're just my fingers go right through them. So we'll bring some new metal mesh filters. We'll leave them out for now. Leave them like that so my tech knows that it's that one that needs to be replaced, and then they'll bring back the contactors on this too. and get some contactors replaced. Okay, so everything should be operational. I went ahead and opened the other AC, got the outside air damper opened, and let's go see what the air balance is now. It should be a little bit better. So right here on the unit it tells you, and we're right at about 80 something degrees. We're not 85, but we're right below. So our pressure should be between 186 and 213, 77 and 78 for first stage, 187, 215, 79 and 80, 190, 218, 75, 76. I mean, we're close. We really are. I mean, yeah, I'm a little torn on this. I don't want to put any gas in it because I don't think we're going to be low on charge. This guy's, I mean, it's a little bit off from the manufacturer's charts, but that's not bad. But again, manufacturers can't really, like, when they give you pressures, they're not factoring in humidity, right? They're assuming it's probably going to be at 50% relative indoor humidity. Well, we're probably lower than that right now, you know? So those numbers are not always going to be exact. That's why you got to kind of look at a lot of stuff, right? You're looking at the operation of the system, you're thinking about it, you're using your logic. Approach temperature, we're pretty close. It says 10, 10, and actually 8 for the third stage. I thought it was 10. So, I mean, we're pretty darn close for approach. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna put any gas in this. I definitely think the capacitors were an issue. I'd love to see a better TD on this guy, but I mean, we're right at the money. We're right at 14. We're calling for, what was it, like 17? I mean, it is right there. Huh. I'm wondering if this unit's just struggling, right? I mean, this is an old R22 system, so I think that we're gonna tell them to keep an eye on it. I'm gonna get out of here for today. I'm not seeing anything that says I need to add gas, and actually I thought I was gonna have to remove gas, but no, that's not the case. I'm leaving it where it is. Everything's running. We did bring some outside air into the building. We changed the capacitors. I'm gonna have someone come back and change the metal mesh filters and the contactors, and that'll give the customer some time, because like I said, they said on Sunday it wasn't working, but I talked to the manager that was here yesterday and they said it was fine. So I'm wondering if it was just a hot day and they were bringing in a lot of outside air, and I think that this unit's just not working as efficiently as it should. Plus the capacitors could have been an issue. And it's been a bit, but we are back. Got a little busy at work, so this one kind of fell by the wayside, but I think that's the right way to say that. We got some new metal mesh filters for this guy. We had pulled the old ones out because they were just disintegrated, and we're gonna look into replacing some of the contactors on this guy. It's almost perfect. I actually have the 4 contactors. I forgot about the contactors. I knew I needed the metal mesh filters, but luckily I had the 4 contactors in my van. You can see they're just worn out. There's a lot of burning and charring going on in here. This one's got some pretty solid burning going on, arcing. So we're just gonna change them all. These are all original. This is from 2002 maybe, so they got some pretty good life, over 20 years out of these contactors. I can just tell by the style that they're all original. These right here, unless people were buying them from Lennox, and that wasn't the case because we're not picking these contactors up locally. We typically get the Mars or the Furnace before Mars took them over, stuff like that. So, all right, well, I'm just waiting for the manager to make some phone calls to call the security company. As soon as they let them know that we're gonna shut down the AC, we'll power it down and we'll get these guys swapped out. All right, these contactors out of the box, there's some things about them that I don't like that I have to fix, okay? Number one, the labeling. If we look at these contactors, the control wiring is coming out of the top, okay? This contactor, the control wiring is coming out the bottom. So you gotta flip it over. But then the writing's upside down, and that's annoying. It doesn't look very good. So I'm a nut, and I have to flip that cover around, but then on top of that, the back plate I flip around also. This one I've already done, and you can see the difference. I flip the cover, flip the back plate, so that way I can now hang it like it's supposed to be. Notice that this one I haven't done it, and you know, when we rotate it around to where the control voltage is on the top, it doesn't have the right hole for the back plate anymore. So it's just a bunch of screws, flip things around, makes it look a lot nicer that way, and then everybody can read the contactors when they go to open them up. Now, I don't always use a torque driver because for some of these things you kind of get the feel for it, but I was just talking with my coworker and we were just showing how tight it really is. So for these ones right here, for screw contactors, they call for 25 pounds per inch. For lugs, they want 40 pounds per inch. So this one right here, That one's tight enough. I've already checked these ones, but I'm just doing it for the camera's sake. The thing about using this though is you've got to make sure that you really push it into there, because you'll strip out the screw. But yeah, these are all good. We've just got one more contactor left to do. We already torqued this one down. But you can see how much nicer this is when the writing's all on the top, so people don't have to flip upside down and hang from the sky to try to read these things. Let's hope that we did everything right and nothing blows up. So what we are gonna do is get right up into here, into the cabinet. We're gonna go shift and unit test. And then we should be in test mode. It'll say C0 in a second. We wanna go to C11. That's gonna be full call for cooling. And then I just gotta hold down the button and wait for the magic and hope that nothing blows up. 1, 2, 3, please don't blow up. They're all running, and this one's a little bit loud, but they're not phased incorrectly. The color's correct, everything's fine on that. These guys are all working, they're kicking butt. So contactors are installed properly. We're good on that. This will get them a little bit more life. Condenser fan motors are not all running yet, but it's going to take a minute for the pressure switches to close and stuff, so we'll watch it for a minute. Everything seems to be fine. These contactors, I want to reiterate, they were working. They were operating properly, okay? But they are worn out. Look at the points where they make connections, okay? These little guys right here, now these aren't horrible, okay? These go like this, and they make electrical connection between this pole and this pole. And look at this one. This one's all burnt, okay? This one's burnt too. So these guys, via the spring, make the electrical connection. These guys are stationary and have power on this side, and then the compressor is mounted to this side. But you can see how pitted those contact points are. So, $40 contactor, $2,500 compressor. That contactor with that terminal right there, that burnt terminal will very easily damage that compressor if the internal overload, if it has one, now these ones do, if the internal overload doesn't catch it and this contact point goes bad and we single phase that compressor, we can ruin it in theory, okay? Now there is advanced protection in the newer Copeland scrolls. These are older ones, but obviously they've lasted. But contactors are a consumable item. They have a life cycle, okay? 20 plus years, pretty darn good. It's time for new contacts on that. Sometimes they get worse if there's a lot of short cycling, okay? Lennox does a really good job, even on these older units, of preventing short cycling. But the reason why we changed these is because we were here, obviously changed the capacitors, going through the unit, we saw that the contactors were worn out. We talked to the customer, they agreed it's time to replace them, okay? So we replaced them. But to reiterate, they were working before we got here. It was just they were worn out and had the potential of becoming a problem, seeing how burnt those points are, okay? So it's natural, when that contactor disengages, there's gonna be an arc because it's breaking the contact, right? And it's inevitable that they're gonna arc because they're open contactors, okay? So it's life, and they're just a consumable item. Coming up on these problems can be kind of tricky, especially when you get there and it's working. The customer had said that, you know, it wasn't working, you know, the day before, previous day before, and that, you know, it was nice and warm in the dining room. Well, I come up to the unit like you guys saw, and it was running. Now, there was some little things, but there was no smoking gun, nothing that jumped out at me and said, boom, this is the problem, right? But in going through, like for instance, you know, I'm very familiar with these units, so immediately I check the error codes in the unit. And the first error code is a power cycle. Okay, those error codes are typically in order. So the first error code you see when you go through the recall is the last error code that occurred, and that was a power cycle. This particular customer, I know it's going to be hard for people that are watching this to believe, but they're not going onto the roof and shutting off the unit. I really, really doubt it, okay? Just trust me, they're not going up there. They're not doing it at the circuit breaker. You know, I mentioned that maybe in the video, but the more I think about it, that's not the case, okay? So then you start going through the other error codes, and the other error codes were old though, but low pressure, freeze stat, Okay, so that kind of sits in the back of my brain as I'm going through this unit. It's possible that the dirty returns cause the freeze stat issue. Because if the unit doesn't have very much outside air and the return's getting plugged up, it is possible that the unit is going off on freeze protection, maybe low pressure, but low pressure is a bit of a stretch. Freeze protection usually before low pressure, but it's possible, right? So all that we can do is just look at the big picture and do our best to get the unit back up into specs, right? I checked the capacitors, found that the capacitors were low as far as their operating microfarads, right? So that can cause the motors to go off on thermal overload or to run hard, but we didn't have any codes indicating that that was a problem, because if it was motors stopping working, that kind of things, we would have saw high pressure codes in the unit, okay? So those, I think, were just things that I caught while I was going through the unit. Changing the capacitors is always a good thing. Changing the contactors is always a good thing, like I mentioned in the video, right? But I don't think any of those issues were part of our problem, because the error codes that were stored in the unit did not reflect any of those issues. Realistically, I think that the return error was an issue, and maybe those were just very, very old codes. Maybe they weren't even part of our problem. So then as I'm going through, you guys are hearing my logic as my brain's working through this problem, I noticed the air balance issue. The air balance issue definitely could have been part of the problem. So if we assume that the low pressure, the freeze cycle weren't part of today's problem, maybe they were, I don't know. But the air balance issue, definitely. We were in the middle of the summer when this was going on. This video was filmed in September, I think it was September 3rd of 2024, I think is when it was filmed. Yeah, September, I think. I'm looking, or maybe it was September 25th. I don't know. I'm looking at the date codes on the files right now, and it's hard to yeah, I think it was September 3rd was when it started. That's right. And then when we went back was the 25th, so it was a while back, or a while after. I think that the air balance definitely could have been part of it. The outside air damper on their bar AC, not the one that I was working on, was completely shut. The metal mesh filters were dirty on this AC. That could cause the building not to get enough makeup air unit. They rely on the makeup air to provide most of it, but then they also rely on the ACs to bring some of it too. That way the smells from the kitchen get pushed, as the exhaust fan's looking for more makeup air unit or makeup air, it'll pull it from the dining room in hopes of not pushing the smells from the kitchen out into the dining room, right? So, all that you can do is just take your time, systematically go through everything. Just do your best to look at the big picture, look at the operation of the unit. I wasn't in love with the TD being at the 14, 15 degree range, but also keep in mind, this building did not have a very big load on it at the time that I was troubleshooting this. So, this is one of those things that we just do our best, get the unit back up to spec, and then tell the customer to keep an eye on it. In the situation of this video, that's what I did. Now, a couple things that I have on a list right here that as I was editing the video, I jotted down some notes. The return air probe, that's something really important. I mentioned in the video that the return air probe was where I had it measuring for my software that I was using. I had it measuring, and it was getting more of the building air. You do want that to be mixing a little bit when the outside air is open, when the outside air damper is open. Now, in some situations, I'm going to go close the outside air damper so that way I can troubleshoot the unit. In this situation, I wanted to see the system operate, so I left it slightly open. By moving the outside air, or the return air probe, up a little bit in front of the filters, it was able to mix some of the outside air with the return air, so you weren't getting such a low return air temperature. Those are important things to remember. Another thing to remember too is the way that evaporator coil on these older units is set up is that the stages are stacked. So the bottom is the first stage, second stage, and then the top is the third stage. So that's something to remember too when you see significantly different operating pressures and vitals while the system's operating from first stage, second stage, third stage. Always keep in mind that you could be pulling a lot of outside air for that third stage, right? And most of the outside air is going to make it to the top evaporator as opposed to mixing with the bottom evaporator. Because as the air comes up through that damper, It might pull from the bottom where the actual return going down into the building, if that makes sense, for the first and maybe part of the second stage, but then from the top of that cabinet, from the outside air dampers for the third stage and some of the second stage too. So those are some important things to think of when you are evaluating the system, is where you have your probe placement, right? Because if I move that probe down into the building, and, you know, because in a perfect world, they say that you should always have the probe down at the return, right? So you're getting more of the building air. But if you're mixing outside air up in the unit, you definitely need to find a happy medium where you have your probe placement, so that way you can get a more accurate representation of the air that's coming into that evaporator, okay? Another thing too, really important, and I kind of mentioned it, alluded to it in the video, is when you are testing air balance, before you start pushing and pulling and doing things, don't adjust stuff. Just measure, just observe. And this goes for everything. Air balance, when you're diagnosing, all kinds of stuff. It's always best, if you can, to observe the natural operation of the equipment before you start making changes. And what I mean by that is you can inadvertently fix a problem and not realize it. So, you know, you can come up and be like, hey, before I even start really going through the system, that outside air damper needs to be open. So then you open it, and then you proceed to troubleshoot the other unit that you're working on, and you can't find anything wrong, you know? So it's always best to observe first, watch the system operate, and then, you know, as I was going through my troubleshooting, I was like, hey, you know, this unit seems to be working. I'm curious. Then I start thinking, well, they said that it happens in the middle of the shift, in the middle of the day, and then you think, okay, what changes in the middle of the day? The restaurant gets really busy, okay? So the restaurant gets really busy. What happens when they get really busy? Customers are coming in and out of the front doors, or sometimes they have double doors in their front entryway, and sometimes because they think it's going to be more inviting, they'll prop open that first set of doors, so that way every time someone opens the front doors, the blast of air comes in. Well, when you have double doors, one of the purposes of that is that if it's really, really cold outside, you know, if the building does go slightly negative, when you open up those first doors, in theory, the customer comes into that entryway, that first set of doors shuts, then they open the second doors, and you don't get as much of a rush of outside air into that building. Those are all things that can happen. Sometimes they'll have exhaust fans in those entryways to kind of alleviate some of the air coming from the outside. That way you can get it out of the building before you open up the doors into the actual envelope, right? Hopefully that makes sense to you, but it's just so important that before you go start correcting things, just observe, just watch the system operate, okay? And really importantly, last but not least, when you are working on these Linux units, right, and there'll be different quirks applied to every different brand of unit, but this particular unit, it's really important, this is the L series Linux units, that when you are done troubleshooting, right, you make note of the error codes and you erase them. So that way the next time you come in, if you see error codes again, you know that they're new. Okay, now on these old units right here, from that digital display, it does not tell you how many times it went off on freeze stat. It does not tell you a date as to when it went off on freeze stat from that display. So we don't have that information. So it's best, once you've noted all the problems and you think you've corrected everything like I did in this situation, I erase those error codes. So that way myself or the next technician that comes in, if they see error codes, those are active or new error codes from the last time we were there, okay? Again, I'm not perfect. I've learned a lot of this stuff simply from me making the mistakes and scratching my head and having to come back a few times trying to troubleshoot things, that you learn to be a little bit more efficient about your troubleshooting operations. And the same can apply to any brand, any type of equipment that you're fixing, whether it be an oven, a fryer, you know, an ice machine, an air conditioner, a refrigerator, is just simply observe, use your senses, look at the operation, and just think for a minute, right? If you're having a hard time figuring something out, sometimes, I'd say a good majority of the time, if you just step back and take a break, you're going to find a solution. Just rethink it. Think of it from a different perspective, you know, like, what could be going on? Instead of being really frustrated and just lost in it, you know, just think. Step back and think for a minute, take a break, you know, and then sometimes the solution will come to you, okay? I really appreciate you guys making it to the end of the video. Thank you so very much. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. It's a great way to help support the channel. Share the channel with people that you think might enjoy it. It's definitely would help the channel to grow. Share it on social media. Whatever you think is necessary, go for it. That'd be really awesome. I'd very much appreciate it.
There's a couple different ways to support this channel if you're interested in doing so. You know, the easiest way though to support this channel is literally just watch the videos from beginning to end. That is really the easiest way. The couple other ways though too, PayPal, Patreon, and YouTube channel memberships. Those are all ways that you can make financial donations to the channel. There's links in the show notes of this video. So if you on YouTube, if you go below the video, there's usually a description or show notes, and there'll be all kinds of links and different information in there if you wanted to, you know, check that stuff out. You can also go to my website, hvacrvideos.com. That's where you can get these hats. We sell them on the website. We have beanies, we have some t-shirts, some sweatshirts left, some stickers. Great way to help support the channel. Again, hvacrvideos.com. And last but not least, if you're interested in purchasing any tools, go to truetechtools.com. I have an affiliate program set up with them. If you use my affiliate code, big picture, one word, you get an 8% discount on checkout on most of the items that they sell on their website. There's a few things they're not allowed to give the discounts to, but for the most part, you'll get an 8% discount on most of the items. And when you do that, not only do you get a discount, I get a small commission from that. So it's a great way to help support the channel. Again, that's truetechtools.com, and the offer code or affiliate code is big picture, one word. Hey, I really appreciate you. Thank you so very much. Leave me some feedback down in the YouTube comments. Feel free to shoot me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Let me know what you think. Do you have a better way of doing this? Do you have any other suspicions as to what might have been going on with this unit? Let me know down in the comments. I'd very much appreciate it, okay? Thanks so much, and we will catch you on the next one.